Good morning. Once again, welcome. We're glad you're here. And we're delighted to introduce all of our speakers. But we take particular pleasure in introducing our alumni. And that's what I get to do now. Dr. Frank Turek has become a very well-known apologist. He's the kind of guy that we used to say would charge hell without a water pistol. He has that much confidence in the Lord and in the truth of the truth. And he has a nationwide ministry, a radio program, and he is one of the best advertisements that I know for Southern Evangelical Seminary. And he's been a good friend of the school and been supportive of the school. And Dr. Turek, you come and share with us.
Thank you, Dr. Land. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Are you comfortable? How can you not be? I mean, aren't these the cushiest pews you've ever been in? How does anybody stay awake in here? I'll try and keep you awake, but I want to start by asking you a question. Why are you here at this apologetics conference? I mean, really, what's the point? What do we hope to accomplish by giving people evidence for Christianity? I mean, think about the people that you know right now who are not Christians. Are they on a relentless pursuit of truth and just haven't found it yet? Or are they apathetic or maybe even hostile to Christianity? Which is it? How many, when you think about the people that you know who are not Christians, how many of them are looking for the evidence? They're looking for the truth. How many? I don't see one hand in here. All right, one. Made me a liar. How many people think there's something else going on? They're not really interested in the evidence. In fact, is evidence always the issue? Is reason always the issue? In many cases, it's not. In fact, one of the most famous atheists in the world is this man. His name is Thomas Nagel. He teaches at New York University. A few years back, he wrote a book called Mind and Consciousness, and the subtitle sent shivers throughout the atheistic community because the subtitle went something like this: Why the neo-Darwinian materialistic view of the world or reality is almost certainly false. In other words, he's saying, look, the atheistic materialistic worldview just is almost certainly false. And he's an atheist. And he's trying to look for a solution without referring to a God. Well, a number of years prior to that, in 1997, he wrote a book in which he said, it's not just that I'm an atheist. He said, I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the world to be that way. He said, I have a cosmic authority problem. And I think Richard Dawkins has that cosmic authority problem, and so does Christopher Hitchens. Of course, Christopher has since passed on, but he said, I have a cosmic authority problem. He said, and one of the biggest problems for me is some of the most intelligent people I know are religious believers. So he doesn't want Christianity to be true or God to exist. Now, why might people not want Christianity to be true? I mean, we call it the good news. Why would people not want the good news? Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World, you've probably heard of it, he was an atheist. He said, I had motives for not wanting the world to have meaning. He said meaninglessness was essentially an instrument of liberation from a certain system of morality. He said, we objected to the morality because it interfered with our sexual freedom. He went on to say, we are justifying ourselves in our erotic revolt. Nietzsche famously said, if you were to prove the God of the Christians to us, we should believe him all the less. What? If we were to prove it to you, Friedrich, you would believe God all the less? Yep. Does that sound like a man who's following reason? Maybe reason isn't the issue. Christopher Hitchens, whom I've had the opportunity to debate a couple of times, this is a picture from our second debate. And as you know, Christopher was a brilliant British atheist. And since he had a British accent, he sounded even more brilliant than he was. But at one point he said, God is a cosmic North Korean dictator peering in on our sex lives. Was the issue for him evidence or something else? In fact, if you read the book, God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything, the whole title screams contempt. Much of what Christopher says in there is true. Most of what he says in there about religious people doing evil things, he's right about that. But it's really a complaint about the way human beings have behaved. In fact, his brother, Peter Hitchens, who is a Christian, said, the book should not be called God is Not Great. The book should be called Man is Not Great. Because it's man doing all these evil things. God isn't doing them. Anyway, if you read the book, you realize that the book is one long complaint against God. He's mad at God, which is why I ended both debates this way. I said, you could sum up Christopher Hitchens' book in one sentence. Here it is. There is no God, and I hate him. Now, why would people not want Christianity to be true? Pascal put his finger on it when he said this. He said, people almost invariably arrive at their beliefs not on the basis of proof, but on the basis of what they find attractive. People don't sit down normally and rationally go through their worldview and try and discover, well, yeah, the people in here do, but we don't try and rationally discover if what they believe is true. A lot of us are just believing what we believe because we find it attractive. Now, many atheists will admit this. They will say that, yeah, I've asked atheists, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And they'll say no. I wouldn't believe in that kind of God, even if he did exist. I wouldn't follow him. It's not a matter of the mind. It's a matter of the will. And we need to keep that in mind. Now, by the way, this question we had up here about Pascal, this cuts both ways. We could say that atheists are atheists in many cases just because they want to be atheists and they find it attractive to have freedom. At least they think they're having sexual freedom, as Huxley put it. But we could also say that many Christians are just Christians because they think it's attractive, that there is a God and that one day we're going to be with God and our loved ones in heaven. And there's a God up there who watches out for us. I mean, these are attractive thoughts. What really is true? That's the question. Because you can have motives for believing in something, and those motives don't necessarily determine whether your view is false or whether your view is true. So here's what we're going to try and do today with that introduction. The first question, or the first point we're going to talk about is, what's the one question you should ask a non-believer or a non-Christian that will reveal the biggest obstacle to belief? There's only one question you should ask, and if you ask this question, if the person's honest, you'll know almost exactly where they stand and why they are not Christians right now. Now, by the way, I put the word non-Christian there. I don't put non-believer. Why? Because everybody's a believer in something. He who doesn't believe in one set of beliefs is a true believer in another set of beliefs. This is why it's silly when atheists say, I just lack a belief in God. No, they don't. They have a positive belief that materialism is true in most cases, that everything's made of molecules. Those are positive beliefs. So everybody has some sort of belief system. The question is, what is your belief system and is it true? So we're going to talk about the first question, or the one question you should ask people. The second point we're going to deal with is how that same obstacle to belief leads to the most personally relevant argument for God and Christianity. Ironically, the one thing that keeps people out of the kingdom is the one thing that points people directly to the kingdom. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, we're going to talk about how America's new religion steals from God. There's a new religion in America, and we'll talk about what that is and how it actually steals from the Christian worldview. You guys ready to go? All right, point one. What's the one question to ask a non-Christian that will reveal the biggest obstacle to belief? I want you to imagine that you're out in the woods and you are lost. Your cell phone goes dead, you're hours out in a forest, and you lose your bearings, and all you have is a magnetic compass. You know the direction from which you came, so if you take out that compass, it'll point to magnetic north, and you'll be able to figure out your way out of the forest. The problem is, you take that compass out, and no matter where you point that compass, instead of pointing to magnetic north, it always points to you. How helpful would that compass be? Not at all. You're not going anywhere. If it's always pointing to you, you're not going to find your way out. Well, here's the problem. A lot of Christians, and of course a lot of non-Christians, think the compass always points to them. That everything in life revolves around them. And if things don't go the way they want them to, or if actions that they want to engage in don't fit with truth, well, so much for truth. The compass points to me. I get to do what I want. I am the center of the universe. Do you realize this? That whether God exists or not, you are not the center of the universe? You realize that? Even if God doesn't exist, you're not the center of the universe. Why do we think the compass always points to us? Why do we think that we are the folks that establish truth and establish morality? Why do we think we get to determine what truth is and we get to determine what right and wrong is? We don't get to determine those things. We discover those things. The compass points to north, and we're supposed to discover what north is. But somehow we think we determine truth and morality. Here's the question: where does your compass point? Does it point to something outside of yourself, or does it just point to you and whatever you want to do? Now, here is the one question that you should ask a non-Christian. It's related to this compass metaphor. And this is what happens on college campuses. This happens to be from UNC Chapel Hill about a year ago. And when atheists get up to the microphone during the Q&A of an I don't have enough faith to be an atheist presentation, if they're a little bit hostile, I'll ask them this question. And I just mentioned it earlier. This is the one question you should ask somebody who's not a Christian. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? Or if you want to state it differently, if the word Christian has too much baggage to it, you might say, if Christianity were true, would you follow Jesus and his teachings? Now, if the person hesitates or says no, the problem is in evidence. You can throw out everything you learn here at the Apologetics Conference. Don't even try it. They don't care. What's the issue then? If it's not evidence, if it's not the mind, it's the will. They don't want it to be true. You see, most people are not on a truth quest, they're on a happiness quest. And they're going to believe whatever they think is going to make them happy. Here's the problem. You can do a lot of stupid, sinful things over the short term that will make you happy, but over the long term, it's a disaster. Everyone in here over 40 knows what I'm talking about, because we've all probably tried it at some point in our lives, right? Let's just do it my way. The compass points to me. So whatever I want to do is the right thing, and we find out later that the long-term consequences are disastrous. So, ask them the question. If they hesitate or say no, evidence isn't the problem. Pray with them maybe, pray for them, be their friend. Show love to them. I can almost guarantee you this: if you befriend such a person, at some point in that person's life, a tragedy is going to occur, and your phone is going to ring, and that person's going to be on the other end. Because when something really goes wrong, they're going to call a person of spiritual depth. They're not going to call their atheist buddy. What's the atheist buddy going to say? Tough. Blank happens. Right? What do you expect? There's no meaning to this life. Things are going to go bad. Oh, well, get over it. You're just dancing to your DNA, as Richard Dawkins said. That will be your opportunity when that tragedy occurs to present Christ to them. When the student's ready, the teacher will appear. Now, if you ask this question enough, people are going to be honest with you and at some point say, no. In fact, on a college campus, when you ask the question, they're standing in front of all these people and you ask it and they say no, and you go, wait, you're an atheist. You claim to be a beacon of reason. Never mind if atheism's true reason doesn't exist, right? Because if we're just molecules in motion, we're not reasoning anyway. We're just reacting, but let's leave that aside. I ask you, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And you say no. How's that reasonable? How's that rational? It's not. The problem isn't here. The problem's here. They don't want there to be a God. Why? Because they want to be God. Because they want to do their own thing. And they will suppress the truth in unrighteousness, as Paul said. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth. We suppress the truth. If you had an argument with your husband or your wife recently, you suppressed the truth. I can guarantee you did. You knew she was right, but you kept arguing, didn't you? Mm-hmm. We suppress the truth. And so do people who don't want there to be a God. They suppress the truth as well. As Augustine said, we love the truth when it enlightens us. We hate the truth when it convicts us. In fact, if you tell somebody the truth in a nice way and they get all upset, you just help convict them. Why would they get all upset over the truth? Because as Jesus said, men love darkness rather than light. They don't want their deeds exposed. You're exposing their deeds. You're exposing the fact that the compass always points to them, and they don't want that. Or they want that, but they don't want you to know that. So, what's the biggest obstacle to unbelief? I am. I'm the biggest obstacle. You are. Your will is. C.S. Lewis famously put it this way: according to Christian teachers, the essential vice, the utmost evil, is pride. Unchastity, anger, greed, drunkenness, and all that are flea bites in comparison. It was through pride that the devil became the devil. Pride leads to every other vice. It is the complete anti-God state of mind. Not the kind of pride where you go, I'm proud of my son or I'm proud of my daughter. Not that kind of pride. The kind of pride where the compass always points to you. In fact, pride is the reason that we call sins mistakes. You ever notice this? Some public figure gets caught in a sin and they call it a mistake. Not to get too political, but I will. Hillary Clinton called the email thing a mistake. That's not a mistake, that's a crime. Whether or not anybody got any classified information off that, the very fact that you're trafficking in confidential information over unsecured servers is a crime. It's not, well, it is a mistake, but it's a crime. It's a sin. And talking about women the way Donald Trump does in a locker room, well, he did call it wrong. I'll give him credit for that. But it's not just locker room talk. It's a sin. He did call it wrong. I will give him credit for that. He didn't call it a mistake, but I think he needs to show a little bit more contrition. The point here is, why are we making excuses? I made a mistake. I regret my mistakes. No one is perfect. We always say these things. Look, a mistake is when you add up your checkbook wrong. A sin is when you deliberately cheat on your wife or your husband. Some of you have been making mistakes for years, deliberate mistakes, which are really sins, because the compass points to you, doesn't it? You didn't think you were going to get a sermon today, did you? Sorry. Why are you making excuses? Again, Lewis, no better person on this than C.S. Lewis. He said, the truth is we believe in decency so much, we feel the rule of law pressing on us so that we cannot bear to face the fact that we are breaking it, and consequently we try and shift the responsibility. For you notice that it is only for our bad behavior that we find all these explanations. Nobody ever gives excuses for their good behavior. It's only for the bad behavior we have excuses. Never for our good behavior. Why is that? Because the compass always points to justifying yourself. G.K. Chesterton, many years ago, read an editorial in the newspaper, and it asked people the question, what's wrong with the world? And Chesterton wrote back a 2-word reply. What's wrong with the world? He said, I am. Sincerely yours, G.K. Chesterton. We're the problem. We're trying to justify ourselves, and whether we're believers or not, we do that all the time. Whether we're Christians or not, we do that all the time. But if we're not Christians, quite oftenly, we are justifying ourselves, and we're saying Christianity isn't true, not because the evidence is against it, but because the compass always points to us. So what's the second point? The biggest obstacle to belief is ourselves. We don't want accountability. We don't want a moral authority outside of ourselves, and so we rebel. We revolt, our erotic revolt, as Huxley put it. So now, how can that same obstacle lead to the most personally relevant argument for God and Christianity? Well, here's the question. What is the true compass? Is there a true moral compass, or is everything just a matter of opinion? I was invited to speak at a church in South Dakota last February. Why I accepted, I don't know. Why do you go to South Dakota in February? But I did. Anyway. Turned out to be a 3-day event, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, and we went through all the material, and I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, just progressively. And the second night I was there was some questions from a couple of young men who maybe were in their early 20s, and they expressed a lot of skepticism about Christianity being true and God existing. Much of what I said they didn't agree with. But, this happens all the time. If you call something, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, you're going to get atheists showing up, whether it's in church or on a college campus, they're going to show up. So I didn't think anything of it. The next night, about a 50-year-old man gets up to the question mic, and he has a question written on 2 sheets of paper. And he starts to read it, and then he breaks down crying. He can't even ask the question. So I went down to the microphone, and he handed me these 2 sheets of paper, and all he said was, read it, read it. So I'm walking back up to the platform, and I'm trying to digest this 2-page question. And by the time I get up to the platform again, I realize this man is upset for 2 reasons. The first reason he's upset is because his family, just discovered recently that a friend of the family, a man in his 40s, had been sexually abusing their daughter from age 4 to age 14 in their home under their noses. The second reason this man was upset is because the 2 young men who were there the night before were his sons, who used to be Christians. But after they discovered that this friend of the family had been molesting their sister for 10 years, they said, there is no God. If there was a God, a good God, he wouldn't have allowed this to happen. In fact, one of them left seminary. He was in the middle of seminary, and he said, that's it, there is no God. And so this man was upset that he had lost his sons for eternity. So I said to him, his name is Steve, I said, Steve, it's okay to be mad at God. The Bible writers are mad at God. Read some of the Psalms. Read Lamentations or Habakkuk. Read some of these books. They're mad at God. It's okay to be mad at God. But I think you'll realize at some point that's not a good argument to say God doesn't exist or Christianity isn't true. And hopefully this is just a temporary phase. But I said to him, do you think maybe we could talk about this privately after this event's over rather than in front of 300 people? He said, yeah, sure. So we got done at 10 o'clock. I said, Steve, you want to go to dinner? He said, sure, let's go to dinner. So we went to dinner, and for about an hour and 15 minutes, Steve just told us everything that had happened. Very cathartic for him to unload. He said, I can't believe I didn't see this going on right in my own house. And I said, Steve, I don't know what the right time will be, but you will know when the right time is. What I want you to say to your sons at the right time is this. If there is no God, what that man did to your sister isn't really wrong. It's just a matter of opinion. Because if there is no standard beyond humanity, then you can't say something's objectively right or wrong. The compass just points to the sexual molester. There's no compass outside of him. How can you blame him? He's just dancing to his DNA. If you're mad about this, and you should be, you are actually experiencing evidence for God. Because if there is no standard outside humanity, everything's just a matter of opinion. And you know this is just not a matter of opinion. By the way, the guy who did this, he's still on the street. Everybody knows who did it, but he's not going to jail. Why not? Because every time the trial comes up, Jessica, his daughter, psychologically checks out. She's tried to commit suicide several times. She can't testify against him. If she doesn't testify against him, he never gets justice. So I said, Steve, here's what I want you to say to your sons at the right time. If there is no God, the man who did this to your sister will never get justice. Because he's not going to get justice here on earth, and if there is no God, he's not going to get justice in the afterlife. Do you really think that's the way the universe is? The very reason you're upset, rightfully so, is because a great injustice has been done. Well, there is no such thing as injustice unless there's justice, and there's no such thing as justice unless someone who is righteousness and ultimately can secure justice exists. That's what we mean by God. So their very rage against this man actually points to God in a backhanded way. Now, Jessica decided that she was not going to allow this to be something that good did not come from. So Jessica decided to write a book. She's 18 years old now, and here is her book, Not Your Princess, by Jessica Mitzel, M-I-T-Z-E-L. I read the first chapter. I couldn't read any more. Now, why am I telling you this? Because Steve told me to tell as many people as I could, because he doesn't want this to continue to go on. And it's going on in homes all around Charlotte, all around the United States, which means parents, if your kids ever come to you and say, Uncle Joe did this to me, do not dismiss it. Because that's the problem that happens all the time. Parents don't believe it. It's happening, and if there's anything that's evil, this is. And it needs to stop. But if there's anything that's evil, as we'll talk about in tomorrow's session, God actually does exist. So my question is, where did this child molester's compass point? Pointed to him. And if there's no God, you can't say that's wrong, because there's no standard of right by which to judge him wrong. In fact, how do you even know who's right and who's wrong? Take Mother Teresa and Hitler. Mother Teresa, the Catholic nun who served the poor most of her life, and Hitler, the murderous tyrant of World War II. Who's right and who's wrong here? How could you even tell? Well, let me ask you a question. How do you know which map of Scotland is better? Is it map A or map B? How could you know? What would you need to see in order to know which map was better? You would need to see a real unchanging place called Scotland. If Scotland doesn't exist, then these two maps are meaningless. But since Scotland does exist, then we can see map A, while it's not perfect, is a better representation of the real Scotland than is map B. In other words, we have an external standard by which we can measure both of these maps. That's exactly what we do when we compare Mother Teresa and Hitler. Mother Teresa wasn't the standard. Hitler wasn't the standard. There's a standard beyond both of them by which we measure both of them. And we say Mother Teresa measured up to the standard better than did Hitler. And again, Lewis put it so well. He said, the moment you say that one set of moral ideas can be better than another, you are in fact measuring them both by a standard, saying that one of them conforms to that standard more nearly than the other, but the standard that measures two things is something different from either. There's got to be something outside of Mother Teresa and Hitler if we're going to say one is closer to the truth than the other. Better